Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here, and today, guys, I'm here with another Total War Warhammer online commentary. In this battle, I'm going to be going back to my roots as the Dawi and hopefully slaying these foul vampire counts. So let's get right down to the business, and hopefully you guys enjoy this one. So in the front line, I have two groups of Longbeards with Great Opens, and then I also have the Grumbling Guard. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the Grumbling Guard, they have a really powerful ability, and honestly, they're pretty much a staple in any matchup for any Dawi army. They give 18% vigor to a pretty big area of effect. So if you guys go ahead and take a look here, you can see it's hitting most of my front line and all of my heroic units. What that essentially translates to is them not getting tired in battle. It helps with fatigue, and the units essentially just stay fresh the entire time. It's very powerful. On top of that, I do have 3 runesmiths, so against the vampire counts front line, these guys are just a staple. The Rune of Wrath and Ruin, in conjunction with them having 120 armor and pretty decent combat stats, is just an absolute game changer. And of course, they do have a bunch of nice little supplementations here. So if you get this one, he can give 22% damage resistance. The Rune of Wrath and Ruin, I'm sure all of you know what that is. The Rune of Oath and Steel gives armor, and then these other ones are actually constant effects. So it gives 4 leadership, 8 melee attack. So when you stack that up with High King Thorgrim's Great Book of Grudges, that's plus 20 melee attack on your frontline troops, which is pretty incredible. So that's pretty much it for my front line. Although, guys, something to note is the reason why Longbeards with Great Opens are so good against vampire counts is because, number one, vampire counts armies are generally going to consist of Graveguard with Great Opens or Graveguard mixed in with Crypt Horrors. So there's kind of 2 approaches. Some people go with the Graveguard with the Great Opens, and then some folks will also just get standard Graveguard, the ones that have higher melee defense for kind of a longer battle, and then they'll put Crypt Horrors behind them to really be the hammer, as they say. So what's nice about these guys is, granted, they will get their asses kicked by Crypt Horrors for the most part. They still have charge defense against large foes, so you can kind of detach them to deal with Blood Knights, and they're just a very good utility unit in this matchup. Aside from that, I do have the Runesmiths, High King Thorgrim with his Great Book of Grudges, a group of Thunderers, and the reason you bring Thunderers here is because if you're going to go with the Gyrocopter build, which I really like against vampires, you know, often the vampires are going to bring a flying lord like Manfred or some, not Varguys, but something to kind of chase down your flying units. So if you have a group of Thunderers on the ground, you can always fall back and always have that cover, which is really nice, and they can essentially cover one another. If Manfred goes to summon some zombies on top of your Thunderers, you can simply shoot them with the Gyrocopters and get some free damage in there. It's very nice cycle. Aside from that, I do have 2 groups of miners. I just decided to get blasting charges at the last second. I don't know if I really needed to, but they're kind of interchangeable with the standard miners. So I have 2 groups of those. One of them is going to be defending this cannon back here, which I placed a little bit further back because if Manfred wants to come summon zombies back here, I want to be able to shoot him with my Thunders and not have him be able to summon one group of zombies that's going to shut everything down. So that's pretty much it for my build. And for my opponent, he has some Fellbats over here. He has some Blood Knights in the back. He has a big scary Claw of Nagash here, which is essentially just being taken out by this cannon. You can see my 2 Gyrocopters are going in pretty deep for it, but it looks like Manfred's trying to Spirit Leecher, or maybe what is that ability called? I always forget. Something of Nagash. Yeah, the Gaze of Nagash. It's not called Gaze of Nagash. I have to check this, or else I'm just going to be annoyed by it the entire game. The Gaze of Nagash. Yes, that's correct. He also does have 2 groups of zombies here in the front line who are kind of waiting towards my formation, so it looks like he's going to try and muck me up and then obviously follow up with his more elite troops. He also has several group of Graveguard. Just standard, actually. So these are the shielded variant who have 36 melee defense, and then he does have one with Great Opens in the back, which only have 25 melee defense. So you kind of see a bit of a mix and match with Vampire Counts players. Some of them will actually just bring these ones with the shields against the Dwarfs because they kind of think they'll be better against Thunders and Quarrelers and things like that. And also they will last longer with higher melee defense. So what you do then is you mix them in with Crypt Horrors, and you can see he does have 2 groups hidden back here. Personally, I probably would have just brought Great Opens across the entire front line, but again, there's a little bit of a debate there, I suppose. But he does have 2 groups of Crypt Horrors who are going to kind of run in a little bit dirty. He was hiding them in the trees to maybe avoid my initial cannons or any sort of barrages I might have. And of course, he does have the Claw of Nagash and some Blood Knights in the rear. So Blood Knights are kind of something I'm a little bit questionable about in terms of his picks. Personally, I think Varix Reavers are much better in this matchup. They won't have as good of stats, but the Varix Reavers have regeneration. So essentially, they can take that Dawi attrition, they can take a Rune of Wrath and Ruin, and they can heal it up themselves. So anyways, without further ado, let's get right down to the business, guys, and see how this battle unfolds. So right now, Manfred's just kind of flying around using the Spirit Leech to kind of poke down my Gyrocopters, which actually is a pretty good idea because Vampire Counts having no range, it can be difficult to catch them, and you can see that was 1 Spirit Leech. Now he casts a second one, and it's going to bring it down to about half HP, if not less. So a lot of people think you should never use magic against the Dwarves, and certainly, it's not as effective, but personally, I've had great success with Pit of Shades and a bunch of other abilities against the Dawi, and it's really not a bad idea in my opinion. So right now he's trying to do a little bit of a flanking maneuver with these Crypt Horrors. He's going to come in deep and probably try and get in on some of my weaker units on the sides and the miners and whatnot. But honestly, I would rather these guys come in and start fighting some miners than, get on my front line and take out my more valuable troops. But you can see the Gyrocopters with their Brimstone guns are doing pretty decent damage. And though they do say anti-large, they don't actually truly have an anti-large bonus, something you guys taught me. But I'm getting in here and doing some pretty decent damage. Anything you can do to these guys is good. And they also have pretty low leadership, being down to 26. So hopefully I can crumble them pretty quickly. So in the front line, obviously I am going to have to deal with these zombies zombies, and you can see these Longbeards are just going to chop these guys to pieces. Granted, the Longbeards aren't traditionally effective against zombies, as you usually want like higher DPS units on them, but still, they're going to do just fine, guys. So the zombies are kind of getting worn down. My opponent is mucking me up a little bit. Over here on the side, he actually does use a Fate of Buna. And guys, Fate of Buna does so much damage. I had forgotten. It kind of like fell out of popularity, but just look at how much damage it does to these Thunders. Granted, it does cost 16 wins of magic, so it's definitely not a joke. So I had to pull back a group of Longbeards with great opens to kind of defend these guys. You can see my Thunders are getting some good pot shots, just gunning down these Blood Knights over here. And of course, I am going to use a Runesmith to intercept that charge. So Runesmiths and heroic units in general are so good for breaking cav charges. So I do get in here, I use a Rune of Wrath and Ruin, and I'm continuing to get some really, really good volleys on these guys. So you can see the Blood Knights are just getting Last Samurai right now. They're just going down, taking that Dawi gunfire. It just feels so damn good. But they're going down pretty good, down to 42 models, taking quite a bit of HP damage. So in the front line, the rest of the Graveguard have gotten through, and I did allocate these Longbeards to kind of protect these Thunders, and these guys with the charge defense and pretty good AP would be able to make pretty short work of these Blood Knights, actually. High King Thorgrim and the boys are over here. Unfortunately, these Cryptors are doing a pretty good number on my Miners, but, you know, at the end of the day, the Miners are kind of holding these guys down to allow these Gyrocopters to really do good work, and you can see he's chasing this Gyrocopter with Manfred instead of being effective in, like, summoning zombies in really important areas, so that's why you get the Gyrocopters. A lot of Vampire Counts players, and I'm just going to run this thing into the Shadow Realm over here. I have no intention of sitting and fighting Manfred. And at that same time, my Gyrocopters with the Brimstone guns are just gatting down these Cryptors over here. The Blood Knights are continuing to run around, and they're going to get a pretty good little charge here. There are some Fellbats kind of mucking up my back line, but the Miners do come through in the clutch and intercept these guys. And Miners, like, even though they're very, very low tier, they still do have 80 armor, so they're going to be somewhat resilient against Blood Knights, and they do have some decent armor piercing damage, so they should be able to do a little bit of work on them. So the Thunderers do fall back here. There are only 53 models left. Well, I guess that's still a lot of models, but their HP pool is very, very low. So I do pull High King Thorgrim back here, and ideally you would want to keep him in the front line here with these troops to give that melee attack, but I figured he would be a pretty good candidate of coming back here, and he's definitely going to settle some grudges with these Blood Knights. You can see he kind of just wades into them, and he has a pretty nice little splash attack as well. So you can see he hits those Blood Knights. Their models are getting pretty low, down to 34, and they've taken a lot of HP damage, and these Miners are being rallied by their High King. Their melee attack is now 30. They're doing some serious work kind of beating these guys down, and hopefully my cannon will get back online here. Over here, the Cryptors have obviously beat these Miners, but still the Gyrocopters have done a pretty good job poking them down. And he did chase off my other Gyrocopter, but I simply just flied after that Claw of Nagash, which essentially got zoned out by that cannon. In the front line, we have a pretty wild fight here. You can see the Grumbling Guard are going after some. Just look at that thing flying. That was pretty funny timing. But these Grumbling Guard and these Longbeards will definitely be able to beat these standard Graveguard. And a lot of his kind of general strategy got disoriented because the Claw of Nagash got zoned out. So he didn't have that sustainability in the front line that makes that high melee defense very, very good. And on that same coin, Manfred has just been so preoccupied chasing these Gyrocopters around. And granted, you know, if I were him, I would probably just be landing and summoning zombies, but he's just been so hard on these Gyrocopters here. The Blood Knights in the back line are doing a little bit of work, getting some decent rear charges, but they just got these Miners in hot pursuit. And guys, Miners have 80 armor, so they're really not as terrible as you would think, in this matchup at least, against Blood Knights. I mean, in general, they're a pretty weak unit, but they're in the smackdown on these Blood Knights. You can see these guys are just circle beating this guy, taking him down, and man, I'm just kind of like waiting here to see these guys take this one model out, but it could take a while because, again, they are Miners. But there they go. They got him down, and they're getting a good little sandwich on here, and they're going to be decent support units against Graveguard as well, and this Runesmith over here just being an absolute boss, doing some great work. Over in the front line, this Runesmith is kind of leading the boys. You can see they got that Rune of Negation. They also have that Vigor Aura. So take a look, guys. This is exactly what I was telling you about earlier. They are fresh. All of these troops fighting in the front line are still fresh, and they've been fighting this entire battle. This Runesmith is still fresh. Some of these units on the side probably didn't have the aura. You can see, yeah, he probably was in it for most of it, so he's fresh as well. But let's take a look at by contrast. So these guys are actually active. The cannon crew is still fresh, believe it or not. These guys are winded, so that's probably where I should be at, but rather, you know, they're in really, really good shape. So you can see the cannon shooting these guys. The Thunders have reformed ranks, and a lot of my opponent's army is starting to crumble everywhere, and the Dawi have, looks like the Dawi have won the day. I was about to say it might still be going there, but yeah, the Dawi are able to pull that one out, settle that grudge, and, you know, show Manfred who is boss. So definitely a good time, guys. I really like that build. I would say the Vampire Count's army wasn't like optimal. So again, it might not have been like the most accurate test of that build, but for the most part, I think it worked out as planned. The Gyrocopters are very, very annoying for like Manfred and the Flying Lords to deal with. If he chases one, you just run it off. And then if he turns around, you shoot it with the other one. And then, you know, if he goes after your Thunders, you shoot him with 2 Gyrocopters. He wasn't summoning too many zombies. And I would say that would be one of the issues, I would say, about like the play in general in that game. I would have liked to see a lot of zombies being summoned on my cannons, behind my Longbeards with great weapons to really muck them down. I think he did summon a group or 2, but I really didn't see too much. The cannon, even though it only got 9 kills, was able to do pretty good work against that Claw of Nagash. The Cryptors did come in, but you guys saw the Gyrocopters in conjunction with High King Thorgrim going over there were able to do a really good job. The Blood Knights, that's also another pick that I think is just very, very expensive. You can get the Varix Reavers for like 300 or 400 less. And also zombies, although zombies aren't terrible against dwarves, because again, the dwarves, the longbeards, they can really get mucked up by these type of units, but I think he needed a little bit more AP. He had some, but the Cryptors just, I think I would have liked to see maybe, substitute some of these guys out, get the Stearnsmen, and, he does have the DLC. He has the Claw of Nagash, so I really, really would have liked to see the Stearnsmen in there as well. But again, just my few critiques, but still, it was very, very well played to my opponent. Definitely look forward to seeing you again on Ladder Bud, and I hope you guys enjoyed that Dawi cast. I'll definitely be doing some more. I know I've been neglecting my folk lately. So again, guys, thanks for watching, and have an excellent night.